Welcome back to the Go to the Field podcast with the Equity. We're your host. I'm Eric Osland.
And I'm Ryan Wimmer.
So, for today's episode, we are going to talk a little bit about drones and drone applications. Drones, there's something that's really gained popularity over the last several years. And Ryan, I don't know that you or I claim to be experts on this topic. So,
Absolutely not, but we do have an expert in the room.
That's right. That's exactly right. So, for today, we want to welcome Mr. Tony Weber to the podcast. Welcome, Tony.
Appreciate it. Glad to be here.
So Tony leads the Green Creek Drones operation located here in Effingham and has really, taken leadership in the drone space for several years now. Tony, could you give the listeners a little bit of an introduction and background on yourself, and also maybe talk a little bit about how Green Creek Drones has evolved over time?
Yeah, sure. So, got started like most of us, grew up around agriculture, led me down a sales career path with Syngenta. During that time, I kind of wanted to get back to the farm a little bit more, back into some more operations. Heard about spray drones. This was in 2018, 19 timeframe. And so kind of had the thought, maybe there's opportunity to be making some more larger scale trial applications. So it's not a college kid with a hand boom out here spraying a 10-foot plot, but it's not trying to split, an 80-acre field with an airplane. But it's some manageable scale that we could do some on-farm trialing to prove the value of fungicide products. And so I kind of worked together with Syngenta at that time. And so we started doing this, bought a drone, started putting out on-farm trials, on-farm applications to where the grower can harvest it, see the yield results, know that, hey, there was no funny business going on here. This is my acres. Yes, this worked. So we kind of bumped along like that for a couple years, 2 years, just putting out trials. The drones got a little bigger, was approached by the Equity at that time to see if there's opportunity to use these things on an actual large scale, something other than just trials. In 2022, we took our first crack at large scale application. And so the target was just see how much you can get done. We were aiming for like 6,000 acres, and I think we got darn near 12,000 acres in year one. So kind of surprised ourselves. I think surprised maybe everybody what was possible. After that year, we thought, let's see if we can continue our momentum. We're going to expand our team a little bit. Actually, that's when Green Creek Drones was formed going into the 2023 season. So partnered with the Equity, Green Creek Drones was born. So we wanted to be able to offer the service like we had been. We want to be able to offer the custom application service to those who just want their fields sprayed. But it was also pretty evident that I think that this is a piece of technology that a lot of farms are going to want to own. It's affordable, and most anyone can operate them. And so we kind of have a two-sided approach now to our business where we sell the drones, offer service, demonstrations, repairs, help people get into this business if they want to, and we still continue to offer the custom application today.
Tony, there's no doubt it's been a great partnership between Equity and Green Creek Drones. And to watch this thing build out has been amazing. I think, like you said, that first year it was somewhere around 12,000 acres, which beyond our expectations of what could be done with drones and the teams involved. And then I think the following year we expanded that to a few more locations, trying to, not outrun ourselves of what we could promise, more of the under promise and over deliver as the reverse of that. I think we were around 36,000 acres, I think is what we accomplished in the second year. And then I ran a report here the other day, and we built out over 100,000 acres of application from drones in 24, which to me is amazing of what these things can cover, what can be done in a day's time. So it's been a great partnership, and I think timely application has been huge, and I think we're meeting customer expectations now.
It's kind of hard to believe that a glorified RC car is out there cranking out 100,000 acres.
It's amazing.
It's basically what it is, And I do want to call out, we've got some third-party partners that are participating in that for us. And so we've got some customers that we work with pretty closely to help with that 100,000 acre number. So not all of those are exactly, Green Creek Drones pilots, but, we represent, our internal pilots represent about a little over half of that.
And I think it's a little bit of modesty in there too. It's not like you just decide that you want to go out and spray 100,000 acres of fungicides in a year. I mean, there's a lot of preparation that you guys do throughout the year to make that possible, I'm assuming.
Yeah, 23 really was a huge learning year for us. I mean, it was a compressed season, so all the crops got planted in, I think, 4 days or something like that. But we learned to be more efficient. We learned how to best utilize the drones, and so we actually found that operating in pairs, which is the approach we had the previous 2 years, really didn't maximize our efficiency. So it doesn't look near as cool running just one drone, but we found we are able to get a lot more done keeping them separate versus trying to operate them in swarms, at least as technology sits today.
So when you go out to the field, what does that look like? How are you guys set up? How do you approach that? What is the setup going into the day?
This is where the partnership with Equity really comes in. So we work closely with the branches to dispatch us where we need to go. They're mixing up the loads in their buildings, making sure that we have the acres and the product. From our end, then, when we're at the field, most of the time the setup is done on the remote. So it's satellite imagery loaded up on the remote, and it's as simple as dropping pins around the boundary of the field. So once we've identified the boundary, the program, the app for the drone maps out its flight. We give it the parameters to follow, and from that point, we kind of joke we're drone butlers. We're just keeping it full, swapping batteries, making sure nothing goes wrong. So it's kind of a joke. I mean, we're still there monitoring, a lot of situational awareness, looking out for potential problems, intervening when it needs. But the drone flies itself, 95% of the time. But we've got to be ready for that 5% of the time when we need to intervene. But then it's, battery management and managing product and making sure we're doing the best job we can.
Yeah, I think it works perfect, working with the branches. I think they deliver the product straight to the field. Your guys grab that product, put it into the drones, and apply it to the field. And it's pretty seamless from the way it looks to me.
Yeah, if everything goes as planned.
I'm sure there's things that don't go as planned.
Yeah, once in a while.
Have you ever had one go down in the field?
We have. Yep. Kind of goes back to that working in pairs thing. It's embarrassing how many times we've shot ourselves in the foot with this, but when you're running two drones together, you have two remote controls there.
I heard they look alike.
They're similar. It's happened even after this though. I mean, so we color coded, so we got bright pink tape on one remote, bright blue tape on the other remote. But when you do it 1,000 times a day, you can accidentally grab the wrong remote. So the command,
because you don't know if the pink drone's up or the blue drone's up.
Yeah, you just grab whatever remote's close to you. And if it happens to be the wrong one, the command to take off is also the emergency stop command. And so we have emergency shutdown drones that are flying over the cornfield.
I bet that's entertaining.
Entertaining is one word you could use.
Sure, it's a fun process. I'm sure the recovery process is not as entertaining.
It's less than entertaining.
Yes.
I've walked in a tassel cornfield before, and carrying a drone out of a tassel cornfield doesn't sound like much fun.
Yeah, so we've gotten smart. We've learned many times you can fly it back out. And so we've learned to take some tools and a few parts that we know are common failures if that happens, and a fresh battery, and we've gotten where a lot of times we can actually fly it out of there, which is
nice.
Way better.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we found a little cart at Menards that'll actually run down a 30-inch corn row, and so we've folded a drone in and strapped it to this little cart and drug it out of there. But
how much does a drone weigh?
I don't think anyone knows.
Really? I guess it depends whether it's loaded or empty, or half empty, or where it sits.
Yeah, so empty with the batteries, call it 100 pounds, and then we're putting another 80 to 100 pounds in it. So somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 pounds max loaded on takeoff.
So let's get into the specifics a little bit. What kind of drones are you running now?
For the most part, DJI has been the manufacturer that we've relied on most heavily. They make most every drone that you've ever seen. So that from the small camera drones to the large spray drones that we're utilizing, they've been our preferred partner of choice. Their technology is really user friendly, intuitive, easy to set up, easy to use, reliable. We just joked about drones going down, but that's the exception, not the rule. I mean, so many times we've had machines that run all season long, never give a fit.
Speaking of that, I think you run the T40s, is that correct?
Yeah, so T40s, T50s is the latest model available in the United States.
So what does that mean? How much can that drone hold?
Yep, carry just a little over 10 gallons, or actually a little under 11 gallons, 40 liters, which is not conducive to us here Americans who speak gallons, but somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 acres on a fill-up is what we're getting.
So you guys run roughly around 2 gallon to the acre.
2 gallon to the acres, very common language for aerial labels for most all the products we're spraying. So yeah, we end up getting, no different than any other piece of equipment. Field size and shape matters, and so a nice square 40-acre field, we can knock it out in less than an hour. But there's times where the 17-acre patch with 18 corners, we might spend an hour and a half on that 17 acres. So no different than any other equipment. Our efficiency is dependent on field size and shape. But in an ideal world, you can be getting about 40 acres an hour done. So I know that compared to some other application methods, that sounds pretty slow. I also look at it as I compare it to like a corn planter. So if I'm a farmer thinking about this, how many acres of corn am I able to plant per day? And then how many acres am I able to spray with my drone per day? And so, best day, we've gotten over 500 acres with one drone in one day. A more common day is 300 some acres. So there's probably not just a ton of farms that are planting more than 300 acres of corn in a day. Realizing it's potentially doable, but so if you look at it that way, if you're able to spray as many acres as you can plant, you're able to make your applications just as timely as you want to be.
Absolutely, and catching that window. I mean, the timing of application's critical on fungicide, so it's nice to be able to control that.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's what it kind of boils down to is the word control for me. It puts the control back in the hands of the producer, whether they have their own drone and are making their own applications, or they're utilizing us for service. It's another tool in the toolbox. It's another avenue, and so when you're laying out a significant amount of money to make a fungicide application, you want to know that it's done right and know that it's done timely. And so the last thing you want is to watch your dollars go to waste due to an improper application or a poorly timed application. So by having the drones in addition to airplanes, in addition to Haggies, helicopters, whatever, we have just another set of tools available to us to make sure that we're getting those applications timed properly and guys' dollars are being spent properly.
So talking about that a little bit, you mentioned that generally with these drones, we're running about 2 gallons per acre. So for somebody that maybe hasn't used a drone for, let's say a fungicide application, 2 gallons per acre might seem kind of thin, I guess, for lack of a better word. So how do you justify that, using that 2 gallons per acre versus somebody that might be more accustomed to using something like a ground rig and where they're applying 15 gallons per acre product of volume across that acre? And how do you justify that we're getting a similar coverage, similar efficacy from a fungicide application?
You ever heard of magic? It's
Once
just
or
magic.
twice.
It just does. No. Great question. It's one that comes up all the time, and it's one that I think has not really been given enough time. So I was actually thinking about this morning driving in. I'm going to take a crack at a new explanation here. Never tried this one. So the dose is our pesticide, our fungicide, whatever. So I'm going to throw out, we're going to spray 10 ounces of whatever product. Okay, so that 10 ounces per acre has got to be delivered across this acre uniformly. We've got to get it to the target site, which is, ear leaf and above on corn. So in order to do that with the drone, we have a different mechanism of delivery than what we're typically used to. We're used to water, right? We take that 10 ounces, we mix it up, slurry it with water, so then we can put it in our sprayer, go drive across the field, dilute it down so we can spread it out. Still delivered the same 10 ounces of fungicide, just did so in 20 gallons of water. When you look at aerial application, we're taking that same 10 ounces of fungicide, and rather than diluting it down into 20 gallons of water, we're diluting it down into 2 gallons of water. Well, how in the world are you able to uniformly distribute so much less water? Aerial application has the benefit of moving air. So we have propeller wash from the drones. Airplanes have downwash from the wings. So by taking that same 10 ounces of fungicide and utilizing moving air, we have a different delivery mechanism, but the same dose is being administered, just rather than using quite so much water, we have the benefit of this moving air to spread, distribute, deliver to the target site. Does that make sense?
It does, and I think I've seen you show some demonstrations with that before, where you use air and pressure in combination to increase that coverage, which I think does a good job of demonstrating that for somebody that's ever seen that.
Yeah, I use an analogy of like a can of spray paint sometimes. And so the amount of liquid that actually comes out of a can of spray paint. So if you took and you just pointed that can of spray paint into a clear plastic cup and you pushed the button on top and collected all the liquid that comes out, it's a minuscule amount of liquid that comes out. But if you take that same dose, if you will, that same length of time that you push the top of the can of spray paint and you move it along a wall holding it about 8 inches away, you're going to turn a pretty good portion of that wall whatever color of paint you're painting. And so it's not because there's a lot of liquid in there, it's because we were able to do a good job spreading that liquid out because we have that moving air coming out of that can of spray paint. Also, each droplet packs a big punch, right? So every little speck of paint coming out of that can of spray paint is highly concentrated paint. And so every droplet that comes out of a drone, very concentrated.
I guess in my experience anyway, you can really see that when you walk into a cornfield, maybe 2, 3, getting a little bit later, 4 or 5 weeks after a fungicide application that was made by a drone, you can really see where those droplets, where that coverage was pushed down into that canopy, down to that ear leaf, and maybe, even a little bit lower. So I've been impressed, I guess, and maybe a little bit surprised at times when you see how effective one of these drone applications can really be.
What always blows my mind is the amount of air. You think of a drone and how much air that thing's moving, which the size of these drones is a little different than the recreational drones that you've seen, right? I mean, it's got a wingspan, I don't know what it is, maybe 10 foot across.
Yep.
But you look at that thing is moving a lot of air. You can see the crop canopy just blowing apart. You can see it's going to drive a lot of that product down lower on the plant, especially towards the bottom of the plant where a lot of that disease starts in the field anyway.
Yeah, if you get a perspective from above, you can, I like to use the term, it makes that canopy dance. Like you can see an area directly behind the aircraft where the corn is fluttering, the leaves are moving, and you, to your point, Ryan, it's like, wow, it's amazing. You wouldn't think that there would be that much force coming out of this drone, out of this glorified RC car.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Tony, one of the biggest things that was surprising for me, I think I've seen some of your work in the past where you were doing some of the trial work early on in life. And you would think running a drone, how far off of the canopy do you spray? I guess we should cover that first. Are you 10 foot up? Or are you?
Yeah, that's the target. A lot of times we're shooting in that 10 to 15 foot range. You definitely don't want to be too low or too high. I mean, that's important. Too low, your pattern isn't going to be uniform, doesn't have time to develop and spread out uniformly. Too high, you're more susceptible to drift or, not getting that canopy penetration that we're after.
What's your swath width?
Current state swath width is about 30 foot when we're spraying fungicides.
It's capable of more, but I think you guys dialed that into 30 foot after doing some testing to identify which is the most effective. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the process, the pattern testing process that we do involves putting photosensitive dye in a tank. We spray that dye over a white cotton string. We then run that string through an instrument that reads the reflectivity off of that dye, and so then we're given then the distribution of where all of our droplets went on this string. And so then that software takes and models out, okay, if you take pass after pass after pass, where is the optimal amount of overlap to give you the absolute most uniform application across the whole field, factoring in that pass to pass overlap. And so too narrow is a problem, too much overlap leads to non-uniformity. Not enough overlap leads to non-uniformity. So we found that 30-foot mark with our current setups seems to be optimal.
And that calibration process is the same thing that aerial applicators use for spray planes, the way I understand it.
Yeah, that's right. Same equipment. It's actually the same guy. We hired the same guy to come in and run those tests for us.
Going back to it, when we were talking about some of the early on trial stuff, looking at that, I was amazed. You would think if you're 10 foot off the ground and spraying, or 10 foot off, sorry, the crop canopy, and you're spraying, you would think with a drone there would be a fair amount of potential off target movement. I was impressed by the lines. I mean, you were in the middle of a 40-acre field putting in maybe like a 5-acre block somewhere in there, but you could see actually to the row where you applied, and it was a straight line.
Yeah, I have honestly, I was impressed too when I was getting into this. So it started out as like it can fly and it can shoot out some liquid, but is this actually effective? And to your point, there's some times where you're watching that thing and you're thinking, is this real? Is this working? And
That's what I was looking at too. I was like, giving it the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to give it 3 foot of movement, and that's acceptable to me. But the line it painted was phenomenal.
And so what the listeners are missing here is some of the pictures that you and I are talking about. And so, yeah, we can go out there and paint a perfect rectangle of healthy green corn in the middle of a field that's dying early in the fall. And so it's pretty impactful when you see that.
We'll put some of these pictures in our resources page that you can check those out. It's pretty telling of the job that a drone can do.
And I'll say too, if you don't believe anything else, make a herbicide application with a drone. That's what really, honestly, that's the first thing I ever sprayed. The very first drone I ever got, I went into my backyard, I set some flags, and that was my boundary. I turned the drone loose, went and sprayed some Roundup. And I'll be darned if it wasn't pretty well to the flags where the grass was dead versus alive. And since then we've made some more herbicide applications, and you can't really fake that. If it was not an effective application, you wouldn't have dead weeds, and we've got dead weeds.
That's impressive. Was your wife impressed by the killed grass in your backyard?
She's always so impressed with me. It's not even funny. It's I don't know how she does it. I will say one thing, Eric, what we're wanting to do this year, we're wanting to make some applications with some contact type products. So if you think about Liberty, popular example, what do we know about Liberty? Got to have coverage, right? And so we're going to make some applications here this spring with Liberty, with the drone. So we've got a contact product to really demonstrate everything we've just been talking about. How in the world can we be so effective with so little water? We're going to prove it to you with some Liberty applications.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, that's something you can't fake.
Yep.
You have to have the coverage if you're going to get some control from something like Liberty. We're going to have to get the product down there. So talking about that, you mentioned herbicides. What are some other things? Fungicides, obviously, is kind of the lead thing that we're doing with drones right now. But what are some other things that you guys are using these drones for at Green Creek Drones?
Yeah. So obviously, you talked about fungicides. That's our primary. That's the big driver. But when you have the equipment, it's like, well, let's see what else we can do with it. And so probably the second most popular application for the drones is honestly interseeding, cover crops into standing corn, into standing soybeans. It's something that there's, some incentives out there for guys to do some of this stuff, and taking a look at that, still learning as we go on that. Another popular application is actually some forestry work So we're making some applications trying to control some invasive species in forestry, some like CRP set aside fields. We're making some applications there, helping guys manage some of those acres that aren't always the most fun to manage with a sprayer with a 120-foot boom. And we're not as able to do as much of this for hire, but it's something that farmers who have their own drones, they're able to go make spot herbicide applications. So we all know, you could take me to several cocklebur patches right now that you don't really want to drive out there for, but you also don't really want to let them just take over and go to seed. Works great. Fly the drone out, knock out some of those heavy weed patch areas that are there every single year.
You can also do some of those early herbicide applications potentially when it's too wet to travel, I'm assuming.
Last year really was our first crack at doing much of that on a very large scale, but yeah, it's a great application. So times like this where or this time of year here in March, where sometimes the weather is fit, but the fields are not. A drone is a tool to be able to go make some burn down applications, get ahead of your weeds to where it's, when it does dry out, you're ready to go and not dealing with a mat of weeds. The watch out there that I'd call out, we still talking out of both sides of our mouth here a little bit of, you're impressed with the lines that it paints and able to control the drift. That said, we also get into some conditions in the spring where we've got to be careful around waterways and yards and road ditches. And so that's kind of watch out with herbicide applications with drones, is just managing that drift to the level that we're used to when it comes to boom sprayers and herbicide applications.
So how does that work on the drone? So, for example, the T40, right? It doesn't have nozzles. So how are you adjusting droplet size coming out of one of these drones for different uses? Is there a way that you can do that?
Yeah, so able to control the speed of the atomizing discs. So you said it doesn't have nozzle. That's true. So instead of a nozzle, it has basically two rotary atomizers that hang down below the propellers. And so these atomizers utilize a spinning disc with fins, and the faster you spin these discs, the smaller droplets that they produce. And so we can actually slow them down to impact droplet size. The other factor really is adjuvant use. And so using drift control products, you can definitely tell a difference, even just visually in the pattern and as far as uniformity and reduction of some of those fines. But that's all kind of coming back to that pattern testing. We're trying to be careful about not changing things without knowing what we're actually doing. And so we're actually making an investment into this pattern testing equipment to be able to conduct our own pattern testing on our time, on a whim. So if we get a certain situation that, hey, we want to try something out, we'll be able to do that in-house and not have to hire a consultant to come in and hope the weather's fit the day he's here. And pretty excited about that. It's important, it's easy to get excited about a cool new toy, but we don't want to get distracted from the mission we're trying to accomplish, which is an effective application. So that's something that we don't take lightly, and we really try to make sure we're doing the best job we can anytime we're out there.
Tony, backing up a little bit, you guys use DJI drones. So there's been a little bit of talk in the press around a ban on DJI drones. What does that look like for you guys?
Yeah, definitely a good point to bring up. So I'll back up. A little disclaimer. I don't know the validity of either side of this argument. Okay, so I don't know the politics involved in the U.S. and I don't know what's really going on overseas. But I'll lay out kind of both sides of the argument, and people can evaluate as they see fit. So there's two things. There's a customs issue with DJI, and that's related to claims of forced labor being used in manufacturing in China. It's specific to a certain region in China, and so DJI's drones are not even manufactured in that region. But if there is a component that is, say, an O-ring or a screw or whatever, that can flag DJI. So it's anything that's potentially coming out of that region. Again, do I know if that's true or not? Don't know. Hope it's not. DJI says it's not, and so that's thing one. So that's the customs issue that's just been short term and seems to actually be letting up just a little. The second thing is more around data security. And so there's claims, fear of data security of of data from DJI's drones getting into the hands of the Chinese government. DJI makes claims that, that's completely false. They're not affiliated with the Chinese government. U.S. government says that they are. I don't know, right? Hope they're not. Don't know for sure. I would go to a little bit of, I struggle with what sort of data they could be getting out of a spray drone that would somehow help them, or that they couldn't get from a satellite image or what have you. But so that one, the data security, there's actually some legislation in place, and that legislation has put a deadline of the end, December of 25, or the end of this year, and a ban is going to go in place on any new FCC licenses for DJI equipment. So that's radio transmitter licenses. So in effect, DJI would not be able to sell any new models into the United States at the end of this year. The one caveat is there's an opportunity for a study to be conducted to determine that there is or is not a data security concern with DJI drones. And so there is a possibility that this study could find that this concern isn't real, or we're able to mitigate it in such a way that we could continue with DJI in the future. It's also possible that if nothing happens, so if no one actually conducts that study, that ban goes into place and we're not able to get new DJI drones in the future. The reality of that situation is no one really knows how that's going to go.
I guess we'll just have to stay tuned and see what progresses with the study, who's assigned to it, what that looks like heading into the next year.
Yeah, that's right. And explicitly in that study, it's talking about new equipment. Nowhere in there does it talk about existing drones that we're using today. And so there's many that believe, well, we'll still be able to use the drones that we have. And that's a real possibility as well. There's also some speculating that even existing equipment could be affected by that. The reality is we just don't know. So when we don't know, what do? Well, we try to mitigate it, the best we can. And so what we're doing moving forward, one, we're continuing to support all of the DJI equipment that we have out. And so we're not necessarily turning our back on that. That said, we're looking for other options. We're going to make sure that we're positioned to be able to continue to progress moving forward, no matter how this thing shakes out. So we're looking at XAG, another manufacturer. We're looking at EA Vision, another manufacturer that's supplying drones. And so we're going to be running those here in this season to be able to provide, the best options should we lose one of our key partners.
You're not alone in this arena either. I think DJI was one of the first to market in the drone application period. This affects a majority of the people that are using spray drones.
Yeah, I don't know the exact percentage, but facts never stop me. I'll just say what I want. So I'm gonna speculate though that DJI has probably got north of 80% of the spray drone market, and north of that in the consumer camera drone market. I mean they're so far ahead of so many others, and so you're right, Ryan. This legislation would have a large impact not only on the agricultural spray drone world, but the drone world as a whole. So you look at other industries that are utilizing drones. I mean, it's almost every industry you can think of. Pipeline, utility companies, real estate. There's lots of industries utilizing drones in many different capacities, law enforcement and fire rescue. And so it would be a big deal.
I think they're huge in all of agriculture too. A lot of them are used to collect NDVI imagery, different things like that within agriculture, different pictures. There's a lot of companies using DJI drones for that purpose.
What are the main differences of some of these other drone companies? Is it mostly go back to the software that runs them, or is it the actual equipment of the drones? What are some of those differences that you've seen so far?
Both hardware and software. And so this software is probably the bigger one. DJI, I got to admit, is our comfort zone. So I'm probably a little biased there too. Their software is very, very easy to use, simple to set up, reliable. Like glitches just don't exist. I will say actually some other manufacturers probably have a little more impressive hardware. So if you look at like the build quality of the drone or ruggedness of some of the drones, actually some other manufacturers are probably a little ahead of DJI on that. But then a lot of them, I would maybe make some arguments about their software has some room to improve when it comes to just ease of use and some reliability. Sometimes there's just some anomalies where we, power off, power back on, and everything's fine again. So some of those types of things are just, you want to minimize that as much as you can. But yeah, software is the biggest one, but hardware is a part of it too.
So, Tony, what are some things, I guess, we know what drones are capable of currently to some extent. What are some things that you've seen in your discussions? Where's the drone industry headed? What are some things coming in the future that might be exciting or maybe a little bit new from what we have right now?
I think this whole drone world, specific drone sprayers, is still very much in its early stages, and I think the improvements we've seen in the last 5 years are going to be dwarfed by the improvements we're going to see in the next 5 years. And so, what's coming? I mean, everyone always thinks the first gut reaction to someone who may or may not be in this bigger, faster. That's our mentality, right? And so some of that will continue, I'm sure. We have seen drones get larger. However, the point I always like to bring up, we have today drones that'll carry 150 gallons. They're called helicopters, and most farmers already hate them, right? And so some of the magic of drones is that they are small. They are able to be precise, and so they are able to make applications in some of the environments that we need them to that other aerial application methods just aren't effective in. And so I might be one of the only people, not that sounds arrogant, but I don't necessarily feel like we're going to have these huge, massive drones because you lose some of the magic of what we like about them. Where I think some of the future goes is around more complete autonomy. So instead of having to have a butler there refilling the drone, recharging the drone, are we able to totally turn it loose? We roll up to the field with a little box trailer and push go, and the drone fills itself, recharges itself, gives us a phone call whenever it's done. We hook onto that and move it to the next field. All the while we were going about our day, taking care of what we need to get done without having to babysit it. So I almost feel like advancements are going to come more in that front. Regulations being probably the biggest roadblock to that. Right now, the FAA is saying we've got to have a pilot there all the time supervising, which, I don't think is a bad idea where we're at today. But as this thing advances, I think we could see some of those types of improvements. Kind of along with that is around some of the sensory when it comes to, that drone being able to detect anomalies in the environment, a tree limb falling out into the field, or, what have you, a bird flies in front of it, and being able to recognize, okay, here's how I solve that issue, or, okay, this threat is now gone, I can continue without someone having to tell it. And so I think some of that sensory is going to get better, where it can really perform well in a complex environment without human intervention.
Which would potentially reduce some of those regulations that could be a roadblock right now. If they can demonstrate that they're capable of recognizing the threats, then maybe the regulations that we have may not be needed.
Yeah, for sure. Demonstrate that hey, we're able to do this safely and without direct supervision 100% of the time.
A couple of things that I read is a little bit around swarm technology, and then also I think there was something about within the regulations of being able to fly at night.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yep. So that has changed recently. About a year ago, the FAA came out and granted permission for operators to be able to operate after dark. There are some additional lighting requirements for the drone, so you've got to have some additional beacons. Like the factory lighting doesn't meet the standard. The swarming thing, yes, there's some stipulations around that, but you can operate one pilot can operate up to 3 aircraft without any additional support. And so in the past, the requirement has been 1 licensed pilot per 1 drone. That's a little deceiving, I'll say too. From experience, one person is not going to safely and efficiently operate 3 drones as the technology sits today. Where it's at today, when we're having to swap batteries and we're having to fill tanks, if you want to be efficient, you need to have a support person there to help you. And so I maybe don't get quite as excited about that swarming language just because of technology limitations today. To be efficient, having a second person there is sure helpful. But it is, in my opinion, a step in the right direction that the FAA is looking at, ways ways to make this easier, ways to be more compatible with efficiency and how we're actually using these drones.
As it sits today, you need 2 butlers per drone.
We, do you need 2 butlers? No. Do we find we're able to be more efficient with 2 butlers? Absolutely.
So where, and I don't think we talked about this earlier, where do drones shine and where are they maybe not the best option?
Great question. Easy to focus on all the benefits, but like anything in life, there's trade-offs, and so this is another tool in the toolbox. It is not a be-all, end-all. One of the biggest drawbacks to drones, as we stated earlier, they're not as fast. If you need to get acres done in a hurry, an airplane is going to be more efficient. A ground rig is going to be more efficient. Where drones really shine is in those environments where an airplane isn't affordable, right? So how many farms are able to purchase an aircraft and train a pilot? So drone shines there because they can purchase a drone, they can safely operate a drone, and so they can be in control. Certain fields that are really, really large, actually, it's kind of a challenge to treat with a drone sometimes because you might not have enough payload to make a round and get back to your support equipment and refill. And so sometimes that's a scenario where if you've got a field that's a mile long and you don't have access on both sides, well, your drone runs out a mile away from you and has to deadhead back. And so that's a problem. So some of those large fields, we actually have to divide into 2 sections and attack from each side. Another scenario where drones are, can be problematic is fields where you can't access them in the summertime. So an example being, there's a field back in the bottoms that we harvest the patch out by the road, move back into the second patch and into the third patch where you kind of have to work your way back in there. Well, you can't really just launch the drone out from the road a mile back in the timber because you can't maintain line of sight. You can't maintain radio connection with the drone. And so some of those fields where are not easily accessible, we think of that as being a good application of the drone, but actually there's challenges that come with that too. So sometimes those types of fields are a problem for us. But where they shine, obviously the fields that are not conducive to other equipment, fields that are muddy, we're able to really shine in those instances. Or fields that have crops that don't allow us to drive through them, right? Even if the field's not muddy, not every sprayer can travel through tasseling corn. And so being able to go out there and make an application with no wheel tracks.
Tony, we've talked a lot about the drones, the capabilities, some of the stuff going on within the industry. Let's talk about Green Creek drones specifically. I don't think a person can just, up and decide one day that they're going to go grab a drone and go fly their acres. There's some steps, a process that has to take place before they can actually go out and do that, correct?
Yeah, for sure. Probably the biggest barrier to entry for a lot of folks are the regulations that require some of this licensing. And so it is a bit of a process. It's one that is definitely doable, but it does have some lead time. And so, the federal government is doing the best they can, I'm sure, but there's times where they don't act quite as quickly as we would like. To get into this and do it legally, you've got to have a pilot's license. You've got to have pesticide applicator license. You've got to have what the FAA calls a 137 operating certificate, which basically allows you to spray with an aircraft. You've got to register the drone. And I think the biggest thing is around insurance coverage and protecting potential liability. And so you've got a budget. It's difficult to say because you're kind of at the mercy of the FAA, but you've got a budget at least probably 6 months to get a lot of this paperwork filed and back to you. And I talk about the insurance thing, so there's a lot of people that are of the opinion, well, I don't care about any of that stuff. I'll just take a drone and go fly and roll the dice. And have people done that? I'm sure they have. But, I think about a worst case scenario and going out there and getting into a potential liability situation with a drone is just not something I'm interested in. So one thing we're pretty big on is helping people get through that licensing process. And so we make it as easy as you can. So we'll guide you through the process. We have some consultants that specialize in this to minimize the amount of time that it takes and make sure that everything is done right the first time, and you've got a good understanding of what you need to do to be legal and the steps you need to take to get there. So we've helped, I don't know how many people, several, 50 plus, I'm sure, navigate the process now.
So it can be done. It's just somewhat of a tedious process at the beginning. Is
Yeah.
that fair?
Yeah, for sure. It's when you're sitting there at the beginning looking at it, it can look overwhelming, and then 6 months down the road, you get through it all, and you look back on it. It's like, yeah, that wasn't really all that bad. I make an analogy to like a DOT number. There's lots of farms that have a DOT number to operate their trucks, and they'll talk about some of the paperwork that's kind of a pain to managing that, but you work through it, and those are the rules. We might not like the rules of the game, but it's the game we're playing, and so it's important to navigate that properly, and we do our best to help people do that.
So if I'm wanting to get started and I want to spray my own acres with a drone, I just need to probably contact Green Creek Drones, and then you could help walk through that process of licensing and what's required. Fair?
Yeah. So what I think really sets us apart, what I think we're really good at, if I can brag for a little bit, is really getting an understanding of how you as a customer want to use this drone. What do you want to accomplish? Okay, so then we can walk through how a drone may or may not be a great fit for that, and take the time to one-on-one explain things to you, make sure that you're going to meet your goals with a purchase, and then one-on-one explain, go into the details around some of these, this regulatory process, and make sure that you're able to be compliant and safe. And so that's what I think Green Creek Drones is really good at, is making sure that our customers are hitting the mark with their drone purchase. Make sure that we get you into the machine that's going to be a fit for you. And I've told more than one customer that, hey, I don't think this is a fit for you. This is not going to accomplish your goals, and we pass on the potential sale. So I take pride in that.
So you guys not only sell drones, but you also service. How many people do you employ at Green Creek Drones?
Yeah, currently have 6 full-time team members, 2 of which are dedicated technicians. Like any piece of equipment, problems are going to happen. Unexpected things are going to happen, and we've already identified that there's kind of a tight window sometimes to get our applications made. And so having someone that you can count on to get your issues resolved in a timely fashion and get you spraying again is really important. And I think that I got to brag on our technicians there. They're able to keep guys going. So we're here in Effingham, we've got personnel dedicated to parts and repairs full time.
You guys can do some phone triage stuff if somebody's having an issue of flying. I'm sure there's some things that you can do on that end to help them get up and going or resolve some of those problems.
Yeah, without a doubt. Phone support is a big part of what we do as well. So in addition to our dedicated repair techs, myself and the techs and a couple of other lead pilots are also available for phone support. So there's times where, you don't have something broken, but you got some questions about how to accomplish a certain task, or maybe you've got an error pop up that you've never seen before and want some assistance. Absolutely. My phone needs to be plugged in about 24/7 during the month of July.
Can you remote into somebody else's?
Remote?
Yes.
Yeah. I knew what you meant. Yeah, absolutely. So anybody that's ever experienced like Team Viewer on a computer, where the tech support team hops in and is controlling your computer from 1,000 miles away, we can do the same thing with some of these drone remotes. So we can actually jump into your remote through an internet connection. We're in our shop, you're out in the field, and we can see exactly what you're seeing on the remote and help diagnose the issues.
That's pretty advantageous. I think that's an awesome part of it.
Yeah, it's cool for sure. A little scary the first time you ever experienced that. I was like, this is wild.
So I think a lot of the listeners will want to know, what's the cost to get started?
Yeah. Is there a cost? Yeah, there is. A nice round number that I throw out there for the drone. Okay, so when I say that, the drone, I mean the drone, enough batteries, chargers, the remote, everything you need to fly. A nice round number there is around 30,000. Okay, give or take a few things. There's some options. Do you want a spreader? Do you want some additional services? Whatever. Give or take 1,000, but call that 30,000. Then you need some other support equipment. So you'll need a generator, some way to charge batteries in the field. You'll need a way to haul the drone around field to field carry chemical with you, and be able to, pump into the drone. So all that other, supporting equipment. So that there's really, you can spend as much or as little as you want, and so you can get into it with a cage tank and a mini bulk pump and a Harbor Freight generator, and so for $3,000 you can be going, then truck and trailer, whatever. Or, sky's the limit. You can spend an additional $100,000 if you want on fancy equipment, big diesel generators,
Specialized trailers, whatever.
That's right. There's a wide spread, and so that one's a little tougher because so many farms, a lot of times have some of this equipment laying around anyway, and so they feel like, well, I've got a trailer, got a generator, I've got half this stuff. I just got to cobble it together and make it work, and so that support equipment thing, there's just a wide range as to what you can get into there.
Some of these drone trailers that you see that have been fabricated and manufactured are pretty impressive.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Without a doubt. There's people that put a ton of thought and effort and planning into their setups.
An enclosed cab, an
Yeah.
elevated
Absolutely.
launch pad, just a bunch of different things.
Absolutely.
Tony, we appreciate you taking the time to sit down with us today and informing the listeners about drone application and Green Creek drones. How do people get a hold of you?
Yeah. So stop by. We're here on 45, just on the north side of Effingham, just north of Equity's corporate headquarters. You can find us at greencreekdrones.com.
Excellent. We'll have some of that contact information as well on our resources page, which is at theequity.com/go to the field. So that information will be there. With that, we appreciate you listening. And Tony, thank you again.
Yeah, guys, really, really glad to be here. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yep. Thanks, Tony.